Was the accident in Brazil really Oscar Piastri's fault? Or are we facing one of the greatest technical injustices in recent years in Formula One? What was it that his engineer revealed that put all of McLaren in check and uncovered a problem hidden for weeks? The 2025 Brazilian Grand Prix was much more than just a race for McLaren. It was the exact point where the internal stability of the team began to crumble. A 10-second penalty on Oscar Piastri, apparently routine, ended up unleashing a scandal of colossal proportions that has put in check not only his confidence as a driver, but also the team's technical reputation and its real chances of winning the title. The scene takes place on lap 6, just after the safety car exit. Piastri, who had been fighting with the knife between his teeth from 4th position, visualized an aggressive maneuver on the inside of turn 1. The move made sense. Lando Norris was escaping at the front, and any delay could condemn him to being trapped in the DRS train. At that moment, there was a Mercedes and a Ferrari in front. Losing the initiative meant losing the race and possibly the championship. But what was expected to be a wheel-to-wheel fight ended in a sporting tragedy. Piastri found himself trapped between Antonelli on the inside and Leclerc on the outside, in a 3-car configuration entering a corner with space for just 1.5. The result: contact, Leclerc's spin, and an immediate penalty for the Australian, applied in the race and without the right to appeal. Until then, one more incident. But it was in the following days that the real earthquake hit Woking. Tom Stallard, Oscar Piastri's track engineer, a key figure in the technical management of the number 81 car, made unofficially leaked internal statements that revealed a much more alarming situation. According to Stallard, Piastri's MCL39 had suffered specific technical problems in its front suspension hydraulic system for at least 5 Grand Prix. They were not conjectures. They were documented failures recognized internally by track engineers and shared with McLaren's technical management. The seriousness of the revelation lies in the fact that the team was already aware of these failures. And yet, he failed to completely resolve them. This meant that Piastri was racing a car in challenging conditions, especially on circuits with low grip or high altitude like Mexico, and now Brazil. The leak of this information was devastating. Because what was aired was not just an isolated mechanical failure. It was an example of how, in the midst of the fight for the championship, a team with McLaren's resources can make technical management errors that compromise the performance of one of its drivers. And in modern Formula One, where the fight for tenths of a second can define the fate of an entire season, this is unacceptable. Stallard didn't stop at the technical. In his words, he also hinted at a growing unrest within Piastri's entourage. The feeling that, despite being part of a winning structure, there was an inequality in how the problems of his car were attended to compared to Norris's. And although there is no direct evidence of an operational preference, the raw data speaks for itself. While Norris maintained brutal consistency in qualifying and the race, Piastri suffered with inexplicable stalls, extreme understeer, and a lack of traction under long braking that prevented him from attacking with confidence. All this broke out just when the championship entered its decisive phase. Piastri went from being just a few points off the lead to being penalized in one of the most critical races on the calendar, losing visual contact with his teammate on the table. For McLaren, this was not just a sporting coup. It was an internal crisis at the height of its golden era. The most disturbing thing wasn't what Stallard said. It was what no one else on the team dared to confirm publicly. Neither Andrea Stella, nor the technical managers, nor the track directors offered conclusive explanations about the car's problems. They preferred silence, perhaps to avoid further reputational damage. But the damage was already done. Because when your own engineer reveals that you've run 5 races with a technically defective car, it's not just your performance as a driver that's called into question. The culture of decisions within one of the most respected teams on the grid is questioned. And when that happens, everything else starts to fall apart. To understand why the Brazilian Grand Prix has generated an internal fracture in McLaren, it is necessary to dissect with surgical precision what happened on the track. Not from the emotional judgment of the penalty, but from the technical, contextual, and strategic approach. Because what was sanctioned as total fault of Oscar Piastri could, in reality, be the result of a series of variables that go far beyond a poorly calculated maneuver. Lap 6 took place under maximum pressure. The safety car retired after a first stint full of incidents. At that moment, Lando Norris was leading comfortably, but behind him, Piastri had Antonelli and Leclerc in a situation of strategic tension. If he did not overtake soon, the risk of being trapped in a slower-paced train was very high, especially considering the pace of the Red Bull and Mercedes in clean air. Upon reaching turn 1 at Interlagos, a critical curve due to its double descending radius, Piastri made a millimetric decision. He launched himself along the inside of Antonelli's Mercedes. At the same time, Leclerc was trying to go outside, causing the available route to be compressed to unsustainable extremes. What happened in seconds was a perfect example of how, in Formula One, geometry, physics, and human reaction collide. Piastri braked early as telemetry revealed. He did it not as a precaution, but because he had to compensate for an instability in the front suspension. However, when braking began, the car showed an asymmetrical lock. The left front wheel stopped rotating for milliseconds. An unequivocal symptom of the hydraulic problem that had been dragging on since Mexico. From the cockpit, this was invisible. But from the technical data, it was alarming. The car's trajectory changed slightly. Piastri, instead of drawing fluidly, had to correct in the middle of the corner. For a Formula One car traveling at over 250 kilometers per hour at that point, a microcorrection can make the difference between a successful maneuver and an inevitable collision. Antonelli, for his part, was also under pressure. The young Italian driver had Leclerc breathing down his neck, and probably didn't fully see Piastri's front wing. According to the 2025 FIA regulations for overtaking on the inside, the attacking driver must have his front axle at least at the height of the rearview mirror of the defended car, both before the apex and at the apex of the corner. According to the commissioners, Piastri did not meet this requirement. But here appears the great controversy. The data revealed by internal technical sources showed that at the braking point, Piastri did have partial overlap. Furthermore, at the time of contact, its front axle was already almost aligned with the middle of the Mercedes. The problem was not the position, but the sudden closing of the line by Antonelli, who apparently did not expect Piastri to take the risk, and the simultaneous presence of Leclerc on the outside. 3 cars fighting for the same space in a double apex corner is not an infringement. It's pure racing. What turns the incident into a punishable infraction is the criterion of full responsibility. And that is what the technical community did not accept. Charles Leclerc himself was key to igniting the debate. After the race, the Monégasque was categorical. It was 50-50. Oscar was optimistic, yes, but Kimi closed as if Oscar did not exist. This was avoidable. This statement was not just pointing to a shared error. It also challenged the rigid view of the stewards, who acted as if the Australian had caused the chaos alone. Andrea Stella, director of McLaren, tried to maintain diplomacy. But even he hinted at his disagreement. Piastri was able to control the car after the small blockage, which indicates that it was within the limits of a reasonable maneuver. What complicates the situation is that Kimi did not open his lane either, knowing that there was a car inside. And here lies the real dilemma. Should a pilot be penalized for executing a maneuver at the limit when there is evidence that the others involved also made questionable decisions? Because if the overtaking was risky but executed with a certain logic and the other 2 drivers did not take adequate evasive measures, then the responsibility cannot be absolute. In fact, on many other occasions, similar incidents have been classified as racing incidents, without sanctions. But what complicated the case even more was the invisible context, the unofficially declared mechanical failure. The FIA judged the maneuver as if Piastri had a car in perfect condition, when, in reality, he had 5 races with an unstable suspension system that conditioned every decision on the track. Ultimately, this penalty reveals an uncomfortable truth. Sanctions in Formula One still do not fully consider the technical context surrounding a maneuver. And when this happens, the sport loses precision, it loses justice. And above all, it loses drivers who dare to race at the limit. The sanction applied to Oscar Piastri in the Brazilian Grand Prix not only changed the result of a crucial race. What it caused within McLaren was much deeper and more dangerous. It opened a technical, political, and emotional crack in the team that had been building the image of a perfect structure for more than a year. That balance, as fragile as the setup of a modern car, was compromised in a matter of hours. The first thing that triggered chaos was the points table. Before Brazil, the difference between Norris and Piastri was minimal, practically symbolic. Both were in a direct, internal, and respectful fight for a championship that seemed destined to be dressed in papaya color. But the 10-second penalty destroyed that equality. Piastri not only lost positions, but gave his teammate a strategic advantage that redefined the rest of the season. Now there are 24 points of separation. 24 points that, in a campaign as tight as 2025, can become a wall that is impossible to climb. That distance not only affects the classification, impacts internal dynamics, because when one of the cars has technical problems that the team has not resolved, while the other continues to accumulate solid results, a difficult perception sets in. The feeling that the structure unintentionally favors one driver over the other. Do you think that Piastri's sanction was fair according to the regulations? Or do you think that the FIA ignored fundamental technical variables to understand what really happened? Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.